Welcome to I'm Going In, the newest and hottest podcast sharing incredible stories of strength, resilience, and love. This podcast is about that moment when you face trauma or been knocked down and you decide, I'm going in. Whether it's to help yourself stand back up, to strengthen your faith, or to support others, this is where inspiration begins. Like and subscribe to my social channels and get ready to be uplifted as I introduce our next incredible guest on I'm Going In. Hey, welcome back to I'm Going In. I'm your host, Todd Blyleven, and today I've got just an incredible friend that's coming on as a guest. And this individual has done some absolutely incredible things in the world of sports. Get prepared here because we are going to dive into not only how he's helped athletes on the field through their mechanics and their overall throwing programs, keeping people just sane in between the lines, but the mental aspect is where we're really going to dive and how this crosses over into first responder space and your business space and everyday life and your well-being. And Alan, I'm really excited that you're here and our paths have reconnected. It seems like it happens almost yearly. And we've tried to do some business together. We've just spoken a ton on meditation. And I think when I saw you in January at the baseball convention here in Dallas, we just got to talking and there was all this chaos going on around us. And it just seemed like the whole world kind of became quiet there for a second. And we were really able to connect and we started talking, not baseball, not arm care. We started talking about mental health and trauma and what we're doing in the world that we both live in to help others stand up and walk tall again for themselves and to learn how to live and increase their mental well-being. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown, everyone, on who I'm speaking to. Alan Jaeger, founder of Jaeger Sports, which is probably one of the greatest armband, just the product itself, the routine. Alan's a guru, in my opinion. He's definitely the best in the industry when it comes to arm care in overhand throwing. He's an author of Getting Focused, Staying Focused, the mental training book. He's the creator of Thrive on Throwing. He's been a collegiate baseball coach. He's working with professional athletes to youth athletes on the mental side, on the mechanical side. I'm just a huge fan of you, Alan. Thank you for being on I'm Going In.
Wow, man, can I take you on the road?
Yes.
With that intro, well, first of all, look, I can't say it any simpler. It is an absolute honor to be on with you. As you said, we might go back, I don't even know, 30 years, but whatever it is, we go back a long time. I think I first met you when you were started playing. But I've seen you grow and I've seen all the great stuff you're doing out there in the world, and you couldn't have put it any better. And thank you again for that amazing intro, because the ABCA, especially because we've had a booth there most of the last 12, 15 years, and it can be very chaotic. I mean, it's a beautiful chaotic, but it's there's a lot going on, and especially when you have a booth. And as you said, you couldn't have put it better. There was this stillness and this quietness, because when we first started talking, normally there's a lot going on, I know, in your world, and there's a lot to share, and obviously with the experience you went through a number of years ago in Vegas, and it was like, I don't know, there was just not that it's not ever quality and true connection, but I just felt like like we really just went right into more of a spiritual, more of a deeper meaning of life.
Mhm.
And it was, you talked about mental health and you told me about your new podcast. And so I was so excited, as I know, you were talking about this. And so the idea of us getting on a podcast to really dive deeply into this more from a life perspective, really excited me. And so, yeah, without any more to say, I'm just really looking forward to diving in with you today, buddy.
Me too. Alan, let's take a step back because I think you look at your career path. Obviously, everything you've done, not only as a player and a coach and just working through the mechanical side, but when did you really start to realize, like, there's some mental health stuff going on. There's some mental wellness. When did you become kind of get this inner peace with yourself? And then when did you realize, yeah, I have something, I want to start sharing this with people and it's actually working? What was that like? What was that journey like early on?
Yeah, well, as you know, sometimes it just takes our own traumas to get us to tune into a whole different way of life. And for me, it's really simple. I was a junior at Cal State Northridge, a pitcher, and it's a long story, but I basically went through something very traumatic off the field.
Hmm.
It really wasn't even something, well, the bottom line is this. It affected me to the point where I had to leave the team for maybe 2 months, and I did come back for the last maybe quarter of the season. But I was in a really, really tough, rough, scary place, and I didn't have any
Hmm.
tools. I didn't know what happened to me. I'd never, quote unquote, had any issues in my life, so to speak of. And all of a sudden, I just got hit hard by this. And again, I didn't know why or where or how. And so a couple things happened. One is when I walked away from the team, I think fortunately I come from a very open-minded family and I was very open-minded. So I started seeing a psychologist. At some point, I saw a sports psychologist, and really one of the, I mean, those were really key. The sports psychologist actually was also doubled as a hypnotherapist. He was a very
Hmm.
fascinating guy. And then, and this is in the late 80s. I mean, sports psychology wasn't really even a term yet, but
Yeah.
being a little facetious. And so then the next thing that happened is I switched my major over to psychology because I was really curious. Like, one thing about me, I've
Hmm.
always been curious and I've always been a troubleshooter. So for me, it's like I wanted to know the why. And so I'll never forget, I was in my one of my upper division courses at Northridge in psychology, and it turned out our professor was a therapist, but he had a strong Eastern background. And
Hmm.
and his class was called Contemporary Trends of Psychology. But what we really did is we went from the West with like Socrates and Plato, and we went all the way to the Far East. And one day he told, I mean, this guy was really cool. We as a class
Wow.
went to a retreat center for a day, an overnight sleep. Like it was so. Anyway, one day he told this Zen story, and I had no idea what Zen was. But it was such a cool story. And I asked him like where did that come from? He gave me the name of a book. And so long story short is that book led me to Alan Watts. And Alan Watts is considered really the first Westerner. He was an Anglican minister from England, but he
Hmm.
went to Japan to study Zen, and he was considered the first Westerner to go to Japan to truly study Zen and bring it back to the West. And he wrote a very, very well-known, respected book called The Way of Zen. And that book was the absolute, click for me. I mean, the psychology and the work and the hypnotherapy and that stuff was doing its magic already. But this really flipped my life because, in a nutshell, Zen is really about not thinking and trusting your instincts. And if you just take that and apply that to anything in life. Now, at the time, of course, I was applying it to sports because I was playing baseball and I was playing other sports for fun too. And I thought, well, when I'm having my best games by far, I'm not thinking and I'm being
Yeah.
purely instinctive and purely like it's like when you're in the zone, you're unconscious. And I feel like that's what Zen is really like a way of saying just be in the flow, and the flow is always happening. And so that was a long way of saying that I got to your really good question that was so inspiring for me to go through this very, very difficult time where I felt like I had no answers to, where I felt like I came through the other side of it, and I did a lot of meditating, a lot of work, and I spent 4 years writing my book. But through all that training and practice and that paradigm shift, if you will, when I got to the end of my book and I was in a state of mind, I was like, man, I want to share this with the world because I feel like I went through it. And as you know, because you had an experience, of course, as well, when you really live through some deep, deep trauma and drama, um, and have to work through it, or I really, in a way, you could say, get to work through it, because ultimately, I try to look at everything now as a gift. And I look back, as awful as that situation and scary really as it was to go through. I look back, and I know it's hard for people to hear this word, maybe if they're going through trauma right now, but
Yeah.
I try to look at everything as a teacher. And looking back, for me, it was a gift, and because it got me on my path. And so to answer your question is that it
Yeah.
started my junior year as a player in college, that I went through this whole experience that absolutely flipped my life, and really for the better, as hard as it was to go through.
Wow, what a cool story. I never knew that about you, where it all started. I've just experienced the passion that you've had, me being on the field, laying on the grass, listening to you talk about the world of Zen and really just kind of letting your whole body go, right? It's so cool. But you touched on something, you know, we all go through traumatic events in our life, no matter what that is, right? And we all have this based on our own coping skills on how we grew up. We deal with that particular incident differently than, say, the next person would or someone else. But in the aftermath, and sometimes during that traumatic moment, we get into this moment of silence. And I've recognized this with just about every, whether it was a Navy SEAL or a retired Green Beret or a first responder or a businesswoman that maybe lost her husband in a horrific car accident or just is having a bad day. We go through this moment of like this fear, this silence, this scary part, right? Where you just had to separate. I went through it as well, probably multiple times in my life. And there's always this kind of disruption that happens, fortunately, for those that are still here. And for those that are not, continue to stay in that silent moment, right? And that's where you start to get eaten up inside and you can't figure out how to get out of that. And luckily, you had someone that came to that moment and disrupted your silence and provided this guidance to you on what Zen was, right? And how to let yourself go and clear your mind. Um, I had, multiple first responders and military combat vets come to me and say, hey, this is what your pathway is going to look like the next 72 hours. Here's what you need to do. You need to go to therapy, find someone that's relatable that you can talk to, get out of that silent moment and learn and reset your focus on how you're going to take the next step forward, right? And it sounds like that's what you did, and it like totally reshaped your existence on who you were at that moment and who you thought you were to now, this is who I want to be, right?
Yeah, and that's really important, because when you're going through it, as you know, and earlier I used the word gift, and I have to be careful because I know people are going through real trauma, losing people, post-traumatic stuff. And so I know a gift might be a tricky word. Maybe I would just say, like what you just said, it's just something that is on your path to maybe help you get to an even deeper, richer place in your life, even though the trauma
Yeah.
itself is tough. Um, but look, at the end of the day, I think that we're all on this earth and we're going through our path. And what I try to do now is look at everything as a guide. Maybe that's the best word to use when you go through trauma. Maybe instead of gift, I should use the word guide. It's a guide. And for me, I feel like that if you start to reframe it, I think what happens too is in our brain, of course, I've studied the brain a lot, but if you go through anything traumatic, your brain can then identify with the trauma, and then you can ruminate on the trauma. And that's what exacerbates it, of course. And I think that one of the things we can hopefully really discuss, that we are discussing today, I think it's going to be important, is that it's not to deny the trauma or deny the feelings you have about it, but it's to try to reframe it as soon as you can and say, okay, this process is going to help me grow. I'm going to get to a better place because of it. I'm going to get deeper into my own spiritual being. I'm going to get deeper into more of an appreciation maybe of life or whatever. But I think that the key is to reframe it right away, not because you're trying to deny it and not because you're trying to put a positive spin on it. But I really feel like that is our path. Our path is that we may have to go through these very challenging times, but then how do you use these times to maybe help heal, to process things in a way that we come out in a healthier, more meaningful place. And I think that that's just the bottom line, is really understanding that reframing, and also understanding, which I know we're going to talk about today too, how the mind works, and
Mhm.
why does the mind want to continue to think about something and exacerbate or ruminate? Like, what is that about? If it, instead of making it you're wrong for doing it or you shouldn't have those thoughts, it's more about understanding where those thoughts are coming from and then how to allow them to just sort of be, so that you can evolve and move into a new space, which
Yeah.
is really where you were going, Todd, with that idea of just coming back to being. So yeah, so I know we're going to get into that too.
Yeah, we're going to get into a lot. I think it's great. Number one, I love this because it's two people that have been around the industry in a very tough industry. Sports is very tough, right? To be around. The mentality of people. I grew up in a tough household. No blood, no foul. Don't suppress everything, right? Don't cry. There's no crying in baseball or anything else. But uh, you learn through your trauma, and like you said, you can't tell somebody that's going through an experience that, hey, this is a gift, don't worry about it. But it really is, because you're going to come out of this stronger. And it's like Devin Smeltzer, a left-handed pitcher, in the Marlins organization now. He was a cancer survivor at 9 years old. He's got an incredible story. I had him on a few weeks ago, and one of the things that he said that just really resonated with me was, out of all the players and everybody, Chase Utley and all these things and the cool relationships that he's made, those players would go in to say hello to the kids, try to uplift their spirits. And it was really cool for the kids to see those powerful celebrities, coming in with their jerseys, or whatever. But it was always the survivor that Devin got more intrigued to learn more about, right? How did you get through this? What was your next step like? And you're touching on that right now with um, the gifting part, or like I look back on what I went through. I think it was a gift in a way. Of course, I don't want anyone to ever go through that, and you as well. But it reshaped my existence. It brought me back to where I can appreciate the colors in the sky and the butterflies and everything else. That's not hokey pokey. That's just the way it is now for me. And if I hadn't gone through the traumatic event or been blessed enough to be there for someone else in that moment, I don't know that I'd be this open and vulnerable, is my point, right? It's it's reshaped me. It has been that gift. And so when you talk about the that looking up to the survivor, looking up to the person that's telling the story like yourself, and you mentioned a couple different words that we're going to get into, like allow and continuum and meditation and those things. Let's take it now from a brain perspective on going through trauma and that what that mind goes through. And then how do you recommend, or when you work with people, whether it's on the baseball field or not, how are you taking that mind and then helping them understand how to refocus
Mm.
and get to that where they can take that next step to uh, walking tall again?
Yeah, well, here's sort of a almost a reverse engineer way of saying it. So I always start whenever I first meet somebody, and if you haven't heard this before, I think you'll really appreciate this, especially playing from a sports background. But I think you can appreciate this from any background, which is the zone is always happening. And you can substitute the word zone for peace, or freedom, or love, um, or gratitude. You can say the zone is always happening. The question is, are you thinking about something that's taking you out of it?
Mm,
So when you start from that premise, now apply that to life. The flow, instead of the zone, we can say the flow. The peace, the freedom is always happening. The silence, the quiet is always happening. Think about your best game as an athlete. Think about the last time you were at a concert and you were lost in the concert, or watching a great movie, you were lost in the movie, having a great conversation with a friend, you got lost in the conversation like we did in Dallas, watching an incredible sunset. As you said, the quieter. I think the more you get into this sort of space, the more you appreciate the butterflies and the trees. As funny as it sounds, you might really want to go out and hug a tree, right? So the point is that if you start from the premise that that peace and freedom and flow and love is always there 24/7, you were born with it. It will be with you throughout your whole life. So now we have to, now if something happens in your life, whether it's small or big, the idea is that you start to have an awareness. Now that's a word I use all the time now in life. I use it 50 times a day. The awareness to know that that space is always there. Well, what that does for you then is it brings heightened awareness to if you leave the space. And I always tell people, if you leave the space, you're not a bad person. It's just practice, right? So it's an awareness of like, oh, if the love and the peace is always here and I've left it. Now, if you've left it because a scout walked up in the stands, it might sound like, oh, I just have to get back to my breathing. I have to get back to my process. I have to focus on the ball and hit it hard or make my pitch. So it sounds like, well, that's a pretty straightforward way of dealing with a distraction. And someone else may say, yeah, but I was just, you know, at a car accident or something, you know, something very traumatic happened. It's not like I could just go back to my breathing. And but the point is this, is it's still the same type of process. It might take a little more work, it might take a little more faith, but at the end of the day, to answer your question, is that it is a practice. It's two things to practice. One is that you have a meditation practice where every day you intentionally put time aside to be quiet and to notice if thoughts come up, what kinds of thoughts they are, and if they're negative or threatening or sabotaging or ruminating about something out of your control from the past or the future, you can start to really develop acumen, skill to start watching the thoughts and being what I call neutral, right? So you're allowing them to be there. So how this all ties together is the meditation practice gives you a foundation like ground balls and fly balls and batting practice, right? You're just developing that skill. And why that's so important is that when you go out in life, that heightens your awareness to where if you're in the day and then a negative thought comes up about something small like, oh, I have a test tomorrow, or something very traumatic happened yesterday, and it might still feel very emotionally charged. You're still doing the same thing. You're practicing being neutral to whatever comes up, and you're learning to redirect your attention back to something that has nothing to do with that negative thought or trauma. And that is a practice. And the idea is that, and this is straight from Dr. Shana Shapiro, who's one of the leaders in mindfulness in the world. She's a professor at Santa Clara University. You can look her up on YouTube. One of the greatest lines I've ever heard, 5 words. You become what you practice. And so to me, that was a long way of saying that anything that happens in life for me, so to really back to your question, that is really the formula. The formula is to start becoming aware, A, that whatever's happening, and then B, what are my tools? And really what I teach are 2 very straightforward tools. They both have a lot of teeth in them. One is a meditation practice, and then 2 is to bring that meditation awareness, so to speak, into life and start to learn about this idea of being neutral and move on. Neutral, and it's sort of what you said earlier, control what you can control. And if a thought comes up, even if it's a little thought about a scout in the stands or a massive thought that may have some emotional charge about a traumatic event, the idea is it's still a meditation practice of just allowing, because remember, if the zone is always there, if the peace is always there, if the freedom is always there, 24/7 unconditionally, then it's a matter of me and my humanness and in my brain of starting to learn how to let that pattern or program or experience start to let it be the Beatles.
Yeah.
And now I need to really become this new practice of just trusting the silence and trusting the space and just trusting what's already happening. And that is a practice, but it starts with an awareness that that is all there.
That's so cool, man. Like, and you know, you talk about it's redefining the silence.
Yeah.
It's redefining it to where, and it doesn't have, you don't have to have a particular place and a particular time. And to your point, going through meditation, if you've got a routine, but sometimes for me, my PTSD might flare up, and or I might just, the life might just become a little bit too difficult, like we all get, right? And it's what I've learned is how to go into my quick meditative state to control myself, to get back into that zone, that Zen moment where I'm relaxed. I'm taking control of this. Everything around me is safe. I'm identifying what is the pounding, what's knocking on my door, what's shaking or rattling me right now. And then I'm keeping it out in front of me. And I mentioned this a lot. Like one of the things I learned through my therapy and my journey through this aftermath, and I think there's never guarantees you're not going to have trauma anymore, but I always try to keep my trauma out in front of me. I think of it like a sphere, right? And as long as that trauma is out in front of me, that's my guide. So as I'm walking, I'm learning with each step, whether I go into a restaurant, whether I go, for me personally, going into crowds, right? I mean, with my traumatic incident that happened to me, things that would normally affect me pretty bad, I've learned how to keep that in front of me. And now when I walk into a position like that, I'm recognizing what this trauma, what this fear is doing. If the fear starts to back up on me and starts getting close to me, then I know, okay, hold on, I'm pushing myself. I have to do what I can to stop. And I think it's very similar to what you're saying with understanding what that zone is, right? And to I want you to kind of explain a little bit more on what I'm thinking, but in terms of keeping that trauma here, and when it starts to back up, I go into this, either I'm going to go to the bathroom for 5 minutes because bathrooms are normally quiet. I'm going to separate from that environment just for a few minutes to let my breathing calm down. I'm going to go into my room. I'm going to lay down just for 2 minutes, just so I can get my eyes closed and just get my breathing back. And I'm going to come back out. And now my sphere is back out in front of me, that trauma, right? So I'm learning how to deal with those things that come up on a daily. When you talk about the separation and getting back, how does that apply to your world and how does that relate?
Well, first of all, kudos for you because really what you just did is you talked a lot about awareness. You have
Awareness.
heightened, what was that?
Awareness. Yeah.
You have a heightened awareness, and trust me, that's come from a lot of practice. Now, part of that practice could be therapy, part of the practice could be just taking your therapy out in life, part of the practice could be from meditating. But you have become highly sensitive now to what you can quote unquote control, which is your space. And so, because you have a heightened awareness, Todd, and you get into a situation and that space starts to feel closer to you, you have a heightened level of awareness to act on it in a safe way, in a wise way. So you have to realize that you just really said something super important for everybody to hear again, which is you've built awareness, but you've built awareness through a lot of practice. And so,
Mhm.
and how it relates to like how I would go about things, it's very, very similar. Your analogy of the sphere, I would say, I use the analogy more of space, meaning there's, I looked this up. Of course, I might get the numbers a little bit wrong, but just in our solar system alone, just ours, is 60 billion times the size of the Earth. Now, if you do the math, we can guesstimate probably 99.99999% of the solar system is space. So if we start from the premise that there's this space and energy available, like there's like this beauty, the beauty of the space, right? Like you could say the zone comes out of the space. You could say your best game comes out of the space. You could say your best moment with your friends or a sunset comes out of the space. Not a thought necessarily, it's the space. That's why people talk about the space between the notes, the space between the thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So I my metaphor is very similar in that there's a space, and it's almost like the second my mind starts to think, that to me represents sort of your um, stress or whatever it is that's starting to feel like it's getting a little closer. To me, it's represented more in a thought. I actually use the term formless, which is the space, right? Like an instinct is just a feel, it's just a go, versus form. And I use analogy a lot with the sun and the clouds. So maybe this will be a good metaphor for what you just to your question. Is I like to think of the sun as like this expanded space. And what is the sun? The sun is this beautiful light with energy and vitality. And there's no thought to the sun. It's like an instinct. It's happening naturally. So I think of the sun, and I want to identify with the sun, which is that safe space you were talking about. And then to me, if something negative is coming or whatever, that would be like a cloud. And so what I want to do, back to the word identify we talked about earlier, is I want to start getting better at identifying with the sun. So if a cloud comes near me and I'm starting to identify with it, maybe out of habit, maybe because, as you know, it was a very traumatic situation. So it's got a little more charge. So it's not maybe a little cloud, maybe it feels like a big dark cloud. But that sun is always there. And so
Right.
back to your metaphor, for me, is I do basically what you do. You went to the bathroom or somewhere to go get quiet. For me, I know that ultimately what I just need to do is to sort of reclaim or really just expand the space that, by the way, is always there. I just
Hmm.
need to stop. I want to get quiet. My mind may still, by the way, be thinking about stuff. My body may still be feeling stuff. But I want what I consider the I to be more of the beyond the me, the space again. I just want to stop and be quiet and just allow what's already there to breathe and express itself. Like I want that to be the bullhorn. I want that to be the expression. And so you do
Yeah.
a great job of it when you notice this cloud coming near you and you stop and you say, wait a minute, I don't want to identify with the cloud. I don't want to feed the cloud. I don't want to engage the cloud. Not that I'm in denial of the cloud, but I want to let it be there, allow. And I want to go somewhere where I can identify back with my space. And I want to pump oxygen into my space. And for you, you have tools, which is very, very powerful. So by the way, you're becoming your practice. And as you keep moving forward in life, I would perceive that these situations, if they come up, that they might have a quicker transition. They
Right.
may come up less and less frequently. And I just feel like that you're just becoming more and more of the practice.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it definitely it's a learning piece, right? But I'm also vulnerable enough and accepting, and I know I'm tough enough to be able to acknowledge when I need some time, right? And that's the hard part too, is I think like taking it like from a sports perspective, the late great Ken Revisa, that was so amazing in terms of giving those tools like you do when you're out on the mound and you're going 3-0, you just walked a guy, you can't find the zone. What do? Your anxiety's pumping, right? Well, I'm either going to get back on the rubber and I'm going to toe it up and I'm going to try to throw harder, or I'm going to take a trip around the mound, right? Control my zone, get the space, absorb it, let things slow down, control my breathing. There's all these tools that we're taught as an athlete, right? Well, at least if you're lucky enough to be around people like yourself, you're learning and you're listening and you apply it, and all of a sudden you get back on and maybe you throw that strike and now you're back in it, right? But in life, whether I'm a teacher and I'm getting out of a class and I'm just, going crazy, or I've got too much work, or I've got bills, or whatever that is that's pushing you down, at some point you have to apply that same methodology, right? But you also have to be able to say, okay, hold on, I can't do this myself. Or I'm recognizing this, slow down, stop, take care of myself, even if it's for 30 seconds, just let yourself breathe. It's going to be okay. The sun, like you just spoke about, is there. I got to deal with this dark cloud right now. I'm going to focus on it. I know it's there. You just take care of one thing at a time. And I think we don't do that, right? We don't acknowledge openly enough. We don't accept it. We're not vulnerable enough as people. We try to tough through it. And that's where we get in trouble, I think, a lot of times. And that's where those headaches just keep pounding and knocking on the back of your skull. Or you walk the next guy and then you get so frustrated, you walk the next guy and you go and you beat up a chair or something in the locker room, right? And now you're out of a job, you get released, whatever. It is so important to like learn and listen to people that have gone through it. But more importantly, it's important, I think, to become vulnerable and to let yourself go. What's been your experience with the allow factor? I think is that kind of what we're talking about too, is allowing yourself to become vulnerable and understanding that that's a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness, because I'm trying to help myself. If I help myself, then I'm helping you, or I'm helping my team, or I'm helping my family. What's been your experience and maybe some people that have pushed it away and haven't been accepting to allow it?
Well, as we both know, I mean, I think vulnerability is a great strength, and I forget her name, but I know she's really popularized it. Brene Brown.
Mm, yeah,
Um, I saw her in 60 Minutes, amazing. And I think, as you said, look, we grow up, especially males. I think we grow up with a mentality of, pushing through it and toughing it out, as you said, no blood, no foul. That's hysterical. Um, and we both know there's such a strength in vulnerability. And I would say another word with vulnerability is it's just openness, right? Like
yeah,
open-mindedness. And so I'm not blaming anybody for being, wanting to be too strong or push stuff away. I mean, you could say there's something admirable about someone to want to try to push through stuff, but at the same
yeah,
time, it's the best of both worlds. Like have that, it's great to have the toughness and the resiliency and the tenacity, but um, man, there's a lot in the Far East about less is more, right? And the quieter you are, Bruce Lee, the quieter you are, the faster and more powerful you are. So to me, I think of more of those words like quiet, vulnerable, open, that are strengths. And as you said, for whatever reason, it seems like males not that it doesn't apply to females too, but it just
yeah,
seems like there's more of that. So the point is this, is if you're listening to this, whether you think you need to be macho or not, at the end of the day, there is so much to gain from being open and being vulnerable and starting to get more, as you said, into this allowing mode. Because when you're allowing things to be, you're not fighting it, you're not resisting it. You're letting things be, and then you can go to school on it. Maybe that stuff you're letting be is you can discard. It's not helping you, or maybe there's something in there that needs to be that wants a voice. That's a teacher.
yeah,
But either way, you want to know what's there. And that's why to me meditation is so powerful, because you're intentionally putting time aside, not just to relax and clear your mind and be quiet and have peace. Those are all very profound reasons to do it. But you're also doing it because there's a lot of teaching going on there. There's a lot of awareness of what is like, here's a simple question.
mm,
What is the state of mind you're in? And really, to your point, Todd, part of meditating is being vulnerable and saying, I want to be open to hearing what's going on in my mind, because maybe there's things going on in my mind that I'm not happy about, or maybe they're a bit scary, and
yeah, it's
I
huge.
don't want to face that. So I think at the end of the day, there is a strong connection naturally with being vulnerable and growing and being open, and this word allowing. And I do feel like, as we both know, that the culture, fortunately, is changing because there's so much talk about mental health that
Yeah,
people are coming out and being vulnerable. Famous athletes are coming out and in doing these public announcements. And so I think it's allowing the younger generations to be more open and to be more vulnerable. And as you know, boy, do we need that.
oh, huge. I talk about this too, where we've all gone through traumatic moments in our life. It doesn't have to be a car accident or anything horrific. it could be something that, like I mentioned before, maybe you got yelled at, maybe maybe you did get in a little fender bender, but for whatever reason that just totally upset you. We've all gone through traumatic events since our birth. And at that point, we learned how to get through that moment and recognized, okay, this is not where I want to be. I want to be back in the zone. We've somehow been able to do that because we're still here, right? And at that moment, I talk about this. We've checked the tough box.
Mm.
Our tough box has been checked. At that moment, when that tough box is checked, you can't uncheck it. So you have no reason to not be strong. You have nothing ever to worry about in terms of someone ever saying something to you because you're asking for help. You're not a weak person if you ask for help. And my biggest thing is, especially like looking back at my own career and, the up and downs and all those things that go around in just the baseball world, whether I was playing or scouting or trying to climb the ladder and define my own success, right? Um, there were a lot of times that I never asked for help and I should have. I should have asked for help, whether it was from my pitching coach or from my scouting director or from my boss. I should have said, I don't know how to do this. I need help. It's in our nature to help other people. It's in our nature to help every living creature, right? Um, but I wasn't vulnerable. I wasn't strong enough. I didn't realize that I had checked off my tough box already that early in my life. And I think that can eat people up a lot. And I know you work with a lot of athletes, and I think athletics is such a pinnacle peak of understanding how to motivate yourself and put yourself into a mental tough area where you're clear-minded pitch after pitch or play after play or whatever, right? But that applies to today's first responder. That applies to our men and women in the military. It applies to our teachers, our trauma surgeons, our ER, nurses, and that are dealing with things that they need to react in a super fast fashion. Or all of a sudden you get dumped with all this workload as a normal worker bee, and you have to be able to adjust and also go home and be able to have a life with your family. What's been your recommendation when you're dealing with somebody that's so like, I've got this, they're not asking for help, but you recognize it? How are you approaching that person, and what has been your advice to get them to open up, to be vulnerable and allow?
It's a great question because, I started in 1990, 34 years ago. And at that time, as you know, this was a very foreign film, foreign field.
Foreign
And
film too. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
It just
Um,
wasn't around.
yeah, and people saw it as a weakness. People thought you needed help. People thought something was
Yeah.
wrong with you. So it was a tough fight for the first 10 or 15 years, if not more, for me, as far as, so this came up all the time, to your point. And of course,
Yeah.
nowadays it's gotten a lot better, but it's the same idea. And so I always go to a few go-tos. One is I always start from the premise of that asking for help or wanting to get better is a strength, no matter what you think. In other words, it seems like the best, so many of the best coaches I know are also the most open-minded. They're the most interested.
Mm.
They want more information. It's a strength. So the first thing I try to do is I just try to explain to them that this is strength. Your mind may have couched this as a weakness. You may have grown up with some schema that this is a weakness, but this is a strength. So I try to always couch it that way. Number two is I give them an example. I say something like, if I gave you a practice, so I'm helping you, right? And this practice was 10 minutes a day. And because of this practice, you felt 5 times more clear-minded, 5 times more relaxed. I go, would you do the practice? And they're like, of course they would. Of course I would. And I'd say, well, this is just, you're getting help. I'm kind of using a different analogy to make this work, but it's sort of the same idea that
Yeah.
you're you're learning something that's helping you. And so I just try to really, to answer your question, Todd, as you know, we're both, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to break through that part of someone that might have a little more of a tougher exterior. And we're just trying to say that, look, see this as a strength. I think at the end of the day, and the other thing you can do is you can always ask somebody a very straightforward question, which is how great do you want to be, whether it's a sport, business person, teacher. And if you want
Yeah.
to be great, unless you already have it all figured out, which, I don't know if Einstein had it. I mean, Einstein would, maybe he had it figured out a lot more than a lot of people, but I don't know if any human being could ever say, when they pass away, like, I figured every single thing out in the world. But I think if you come from that in a soft way without trying to make it a hard sell, and you just try to be real with people, like, look, don't you want to be the best version of yourself? Well, how is not getting help, whether it's in learning how to do a computer program or playing the guitar or learning how to throw a pitch or learning how to be quieter in your mind or learning how to deal with distractive thoughts better or
Yeah.
learning maybe where confidence comes from or trust or peace, like love. Like these are, you could take any field and just say, look, there's an area there that we can talk about that maybe you can get better at. And so I think that would be, my go-to with, and you're right, it can be a tough, especially if someone's not open to it. I've just learned, I still try to push a little bit. I try to sell them to a degree. But I've also learned that, there's a great, saying that the teacher will appear when the student is ready. And so, but I'm like you, meaning I feel like I've been through a lot and it's not an ego thing. I just feel like from
Right.
experience and also from teaching this for 34 years and seeing the
Yeah.
before and after, I just don't give up. Like I don't like this idea of just not trying. I will try. I will shake the cage really hard, even though sometimes you just feel like the person just is not ready. And so at some point you have to respect their space. But I do think that there are ways to massage it. And I like to think of being able to get to a person 100 out of 100 times if you just massage it the right way.
There's probably no surprise that that person's where they're at. If you know Mike Trout and you watched Mike Trout grow up and you watch Mike Trout train every day, if you watched all that happen, you're probably not surprised that Mike Trout is who he is today, right? All of a sudden, it didn't just happen where you're going, man, that surprises me that he's one of the best players in the game of baseball. Or you watch my dad. When my dad was going at it, he worked out every day. I mean, I remember I say this story all the time. I was following him at a young age. We're going up the hills in Villa Park, California, and I'm like, Dad, when are you going to stop? He points at that sign and says, no stopping here. I
Mm,
can't stop because if I stop, there's 1,000 other people that want my job and I need to keep going, right? It was that internal grind every day that he had mentally just to keep his body in shape, but he knew where he needed to be successful both mentally and physically in the game of baseball, right? And he carried that over and he still does in life, where he knows where his zone is and he stays there. And if he gets distracted or whatever, he backs up and he gets back on. And at times we have to say no to things that are going to be a distractant, right? But I think if we can learn from other people that have had success, like going back to Devin Smeltzer, where he says, I learned from the survivors. Well, why are those people so important? Because they knew how to take the next step to get to where he needs to go, right? So if we can understand where we're at and find somebody that's having a relatable feeling or maybe something that somebody's gone through in a relatable circumstance and try to become a student of how they move forward in their life or got themselves to a confident place. And in that moment of Zen, like you described, that's where it's all about. Cause it's all like, it's not cookie cutter, right? And I know for me, that's where I'm at. like I said, if my life gets really crazy, which it does a lot because of just so many things that I have going on, or I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I got dogs that drive me crazy sometimes, but I know how to control myself and I know how to get myself back and I know what I need to do. And, I'm very faith based. So I know I'll say a quick prayer. I'll just escape into it. I'll go outside, take a deep breath. I look up into the clouds. I have my moment and it just calms me down. Right. If I go into church, it's where I can truly take my armor off in that moment. It's where I feel the safest. But that's what you need to study and listen to stories like what you're talking about. Um, I thought maybe we kind of wrap up a little bit, but I wanted to talk about the continuum piece because you brought that up, and I wanted to learn more about what you were talking about with that, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just had this visual of you talking about taking your armor off in church, and that reminded me so much of like you being in that space I was talking about, right? Where you're at peace, you're free.
Mhm.
Um, there's just a sense of like you're beyond the story per se of what's happened in your life, and there's not necessarily a narrative there because you've let it go. And I'd almost say like that is a good angle for the continuum, meaning
Mm.
if you saw that space you're in church with the armor off, right? And I use that analogy with like the zone, right? The armor's off, you're just in, or my space, right? And I would just say, so just imagine that that Todd part of you is always there. And that's the continuum. So the church you can bring into life. Now you may say, okay, but that's great in church, or it's great when I'm in the bathroom at an event. I have places to go, I have tools to use, and that's great. Use the tools. But what the continuum is saying is that space is always there. And it's just
Mm.
whether we leave it. Now we might leave it because of a very what might seem like temporal thought that's not super threatening, or we might get more of an emotional feeling from the past that might feel stronger. And the idea is that you just continue to trust that space that you're in the church, where you're just like, I'm safe, I'm free. There's not really even a Todd here. There's not even really a Todd. Something happened to Todd 5 years ago or 7 years ago, right? There's not a Todd here that someone yelled at this morning. Now, if I go into that and have a conversation with that, I can kind of create that. That was that sphere part you were talking about earlier.
Right.
And so really the continuum is that whatever you could say whatever your faith is, you could say whatever your belief system is, you can say whatever you feel in your core is your true, I use the word being. Like who are you just when you're being? In other words, lost in a good movie, lost in a good song,
Mm.
lost in a good game, lost in a good sunset at church where you feel like you're very safe. And that is the continuum. And when you just know that, so to your question, when you just know the continuum is always there, there's a sense of like relief, and there's also a sense of awareness that I have somewhere to go. And I'll tell you one other thing that you can, this again is maybe practice, but it also helps to keep things very simple, which we all want in life, and
Mm.
light, because you start realizing that, wait, here comes some heaviness. Here comes a little cloud. Here comes a big cloud. Here comes a dark cloud. I'm not trying to minimize how that may feel, but the practice is to keep, and I use this word a lot, which I haven't used yet today. The practice is you keep defaulting to
Mm.
the continuum, whether you're physically in church or you want to visualize yourself being in church, or the feeling you get when you go into the bathroom, or the feeling you get when you look up at the sky, as you said earlier. And you might have a bunch of them built in because you've been practicing this. You become what you practice. And so I would just sort of, to wrap that up in a nutshell, I would just say, look at the continuum. Is that most optimal, safe, free, natural place, like the analogies we used earlier, the sunset, a great conversation, being in church, wherever it is for you. And for me, it's space. when I go into space, which sounds funny because you can say, well, here's Alan. What do you mean space? There's Alan. I actually physically feel like I'm removed in a way, which is
Mm,
funny. When we talk about the zone, we also use the term out of body experience.
mm,
So for me, this idea of really being out of body in a way, being more in the space, back to the universe is 99, 60 billion times the size of the planet
mm,
Earth.
yeah,
I want to be in the universal. Like I want to feel all the energy of the space
yeah,
that's already, let's call it in harmony. It's already doing the magic. That's the flow. So I want to just be there. And that for me is a continuum. And then if I leave that and go into a thought, which might seem simple, but maybe I dwell on it, or maybe I worry about it, or maybe it's something traumatic that I start to engage. And so to me, I've left the continuum, even though, not to confuse anybody, but the continuum is still going. Even if you
yeah,
think you left it, it's still there. And so I love that description, that metaphor, because I just feel like that we can all, it gives us all a lot of peace of mind, just knowing it's there, even if we don't feel like we can feel it fully or feel it even at all in that moment. To just know it's there, and again, you have tools that help you connect to it. And
yeah,
I hope that people listening to this today, um, some of the things they can pick up from our conversation is that A, aware that this is all, what's here, and B, to start having tools to start driving them toward this space. And also, I would say to have the tool of being aware of when thoughts come up or if a trauma comes up. Really, the main tool I use with people is this idea of just being neutral. Just let it be there, allow it to be there. I know it wants to have a conversation, I know it wants engagement. And our job is to let it be, allow it to be there, be neutral to it, and then start to move our attention back to the church, back to the bathroom, back to the space, back to, in my case, maybe breathing,
yeah,
back to where your feet are, back to the moment. Just do your best in this moment to appreciate. This is an sorry for the long answer. This is another cool piece that comes with all this is gratitude.
yeah.
You realize that, what was that?
Totally. Yep, you're hitting it.
Well, when you realize in this moment that I'm grateful to be alive, I'm grateful to be having a conversation with you. I'm grateful to be learning today from you and growing from this conversation. I'm grateful for a million things that are happening in life. And so all of a sudden, this moment, another word I like to use in meditations is this new moment is innocent and precious and fresh and new. Even if we feel like we're bringing some of the past into it, if we're just aware that that's the continuum too, if we're just aware that the innocence and beauty and freshness is in this moment, and to try to just realize to have gratitude for this new moment, even if something else is trying to get our attention or maybe is trying to distract us or is pushing a emotion into our body, where our job is to still just do our best to allow it, allow it, allow it, be neutral, be neutral, be neutral. Don't feed it, don't feed it, don't feed it. And then come back to trust and faith in this continuum that's always there. And to me, yeah, it's sort of 34 years in a nutshell, that last 5 minutes.
Man, that was awesome though. I could listen to you all day long. And it's so funny. And I mean, you've always been the same. You know, you've always kind of had that continuum, that feeling, that flow to you. The keep it light, keep it simple. You've always had, from the outside perspective, right? You've always been together. You've always been 100% like in your own universe, and you've been in this space, and I could totally see you just kind of floating there and absorbing everything that comes in and deflecting, and like that Bruce Lee analogy you used. But yeah, so cool. So many sound bites of wisdom that you just threw down, and it applies to so many of us on a general population basis, all the way across, no matter what you're doing. Yeah, it's just so great. I learned a lot. I continue to always learn from you. I've been a student of my own life, over the past several years, and it's just progressively gotten more intense, and it's been great. Celebrate my successes. When I feel good, I try to replicate those. When I feel that dark cloud come, I try to understand where it's coming from, why is it coming up on me, and what can I do to deflect that or take care of it and put it away. And sometimes we can't ignore some of these things that happen, right? We have to learn from them, understand why the sphere, why we're off the highway, which is something I was thinking about too while you were talking as we wrap up. I know I've used different analogies to what you're saying, like get back on the highway. My dad used to always talk about that. Like, hey, your life is like a highway, and all of a sudden you're going to get off and you're going to get into some trouble. And when you get into that trouble, you're going to have to get back on somehow. Like, that's the continuum that everybody keeps referring to, is the highway or your own path or walkway or whatever that is, right? Um, but it's about that, being strong enough to recognize it, say something that, hey, I need some help. Find a relatable story. If you're into therapy, make sure when you're going to a therapist, you can talk to them beyond the 8 seconds. It took me a couple people to get through before I found my angel of a therapist, Diane Logren, here in Plano, Texas. She's amazing. For me personally. But yeah, thank you so much for just being on this. I want to have you back. Like, let's keep doing this. And, you know, um, I just, yeah, it's just been a great friendship, Alan. I really appreciate everything.
Yeah, well, listen, man. Thank you for all the kind words, and you inspire me because you're a model living this, and you know, it's one thing to study it, it's one thing to do some training and some practice or some therapy and have a good feel for it and be able to talk the talk. But one of the things that hit me in Dallas, because we hadn't really gone quite there, even though we our conversations usually have a lot of substance, but I could feel the transition with you or transformation. And even like today, I got goosebumps because it's like fire and fire, like what do they say? Steel sharpens steel, whatever the saying is. Like I
Mhm.
can feel your effect on me because you're living it. And I'm going to go back to the word awareness. You're living in a state of awareness. Doesn't mean we're perfect, but you know, but when you're aware, at least you have an option to make adjustments faster. You have an option to start becoming that practice deeper. And the last thing I'll say is this, and I appreciate the kind words about, me seeming like I'm in a flow and all that. I've had my challenges as well, over the years, as we all do. Like I said about being perfect, we get these challenges, which I call teachers. But I will say this, and it's not like to pump myself up or make it sound like conditional, like you should do this or else you don't get that. I can only speak on from my experience and really working with a lot of people as well. But
Yeah.
the dedication and discipline to have a daily practice. I mean, I don't know how many days in the last 34 years I haven't meditated, which I don't want to make this a contest, but I have worked very, very hard, and I think not hard like brainy, grindy, although at times it feels like that too.
Mhm.
But I've just worked. Maybe the word is dedication. I've just been very dedicated to my meditation practice, and not only to just sitting in my meditation where I practice, but for the last 2 or 3 years, maybe the last year especially, I've been very dedicated to bring that continuum, that meditation wherever I go. And maybe that's a good way to kind of summarize this, which is for me now, life is the continuum, meaning even right now, it is a meditation. Like there is a sense of awareness. Am I connected? Am I in communion with you? Am I speaking from a place of just sort of flowing, or am I thinking about all this stuff? Am I worrying about something later on today? So everywhere I go now, the continuum, as I've said a few times, I believe I just I feel it. Like the continuum is always there. And so I want to be connected to that as often as I can. And again, I'm not perfect. Maybe I'll go into Alan's brain about something and worry about something. But I feel like that for the listeners, I just want them to understand that this is a practice, and that Shauna's line about you become what you practice is so big. And I feel it with you. Like I feel like you've become your practice and your awareness, and it's inspiring. And so thank you for not only being a great friend all these years, and really you've been such a great friend, and you've always been so supportive for someone who's done so much in this game, and now you're in this other part of life. But thank you for having me on and having this conversation, because to me, we both know whether it's something very traumatic or it's something just general mental health, like too much time on, playing video games or whatever. It's just the social media. There's so much mental health stuff going on now that doing this means a lot to me, and doing it
Yeah.
with you, man, has been just awesome. So thank you.
Yeah. No, let's continue to keep the fight up, right? And keep staying in our moment, in our space. And listen, if anybody's out there listening and this resonates with you and you don't know how to really take that step forward, or you want to learn more, please, we're going to put some of your stuff on the show here, Alan, with your website, how people can reach out, they can connect to your books. I know you got some videos and things like that too. And then I'm going to flip it a little bit on the baseball side. If you're wanting to take care of that arm, make sure you're going into Jaeger Sports, and we'll put that up to too, because I think I love those bands. Such a great idea, and the program itself, everything you do, you're zen. You're just the way that you describe it. You're an ultimate coach. You're an educator, and what you've been able to do for thousands and thousands and thousands of baseball and softball athletes is just incredible. So hats off to you, man. A lot of hard work. Nothing comes easy. You busted your tail. So thanks for being on. I'm going in. Really appreciate it and look forward to our next talk.
Yeah, and Todd, real quick, if I can
Yeah.
just mention, we have so many free resources, as you mentioned, online. And also, our vice president, China McCarney, has a free, it's called Triple AD, Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression. And it's really cool. Like they have free resources for therapists, they connect you. It's a really cool deal. And he's written a couple of books. So just triplead.org, I believe is what it is. But if you Google China McCarney, you can get to it, and that's a free resource as well. So I wanted to make sure that I let people know about that as well.
I'm sure as we're talking right now, all of that's flashing up on the screen as we're going through the editing process, and we'll make sure that's in the descriptives, and we'll also try to have a link back to China as well. So yeah, that's awesome. Anything we can do to help.
Yeah, well, appreciate you having me on, brother.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.